I will just take a moment before I introduce our guest, Michael, today, just to share a little project.
There is a robust network of professionals working in and around Connecticut in every sector: public policy, consumer goods, professional services, and those folks are very concerned about climate change. They're looking for ways to incorporate their personal passion and interest around climate change into the work they do. The Connecticut Climate Action Business Summit is designed to provide knowledgeable workshops, interactive and engaging conversations, and Q&A with experts in the field to help these individuals be able to incorporate climate change into their work and hopefully collectively address the climate crisis.
We believe business can be a force for good. So naturally, climate change is a challenge for the business community, and it's now our opportunity to be part of this solution. Of course, one of the biggest challenges in this country is that the US is 5% of the world's population, but consumes 25% of the world's energy. So we, more than any other population, are in command of the outcome here. We are the generation of the future. We are the ones that hold the solution. We just need the motivation, and coming together will give us the camaraderie to enable that.
This is an opportunity for us to hit the reset button. And through the Connecticut Climate Action Business Summit, we can connect to each other. We can learn more about what it is that each of us is doing, where are our skills and talents, and how can we leverage those individually and collectively to address the climate crisis.
Our hope is that the outcome of this summit will be that people can leave both energized, fulfilled, educated, and motivated to actually do something about it.
So what a great segue to introduce our guest today, Michael Waas from Terracycle. And one of the biggest challenges as a community is how we can best manage this consumer culture that we are so deeply involved with in a sustainable way. Why don't I pass the baton over to Michael? Like I said, I was introduced to Terracycle when we were talking to Lovesac, and he mentioned that Lovesac and Terracycle have had a good collaborative experience together. And then when I explored what Terracycle are doing, I became more and more impressed with the scale of your operation and the way that you approach this problem. So, Michael, we're really happy to have you here today. Thanks for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you to drive us through whatever material that you want, and then we'll open it up to the group.
Wonderful. Thanks, Glenn, for the introduction and the warm welcome. I'm really glad to be with you all today. And I'm not sure how familiar, if at all, you are with Terracycle and Loop, one of our platforms. But I thought I'd start with a quick introduction to myself, and then we jump in, and I'll give you an overview of our work, the solutions that we've been working on over the last 15 years, and then open things up for questions. And so just a little bit about me. I've grew up as a child fascinated with social change and very skeptical of the business community. I protested everywhere from Disney World to nuclear missile silos against the inequality that seemed to be the inevitable result of capitalism. And went to college with the intention to teach. Graduate school, I found out about the concept of social enterprise and the triple bottom line. This was now 15 years ago, and was fascinated with the ability of harnessing the market to drive impact beyond profit and to adjust that criteria. So I left graduate school, did a fellowship called Starting Block, which was for people interested in social enterprise. Saw the founder and CEO of Terracycle, Tom Zaki, speak at the opening night of this fellowship. And then 2 weeks later, bumped into him whilst at the airport on my way to a job interview. And it felt like fate. That conversation resulted in me moving to Trenton, New Jersey the next week and starting at Terracycle. and that was 12 years ago. At the time, I thought I'd be there for 2 years and then go back to grad school and teach. And I've never stopped learning, never stopped being proud of the work that we're doing, and so have stuck around. And so what I'd like to do is share an overview of the work that Terracycle does. At a high level, Terracycle is a purpose-driven for-profit business focused on eliminating the idea of waste. And we do that through a number of models. We operate globally. Our global headquarters is in Trenton, New Jersey. We also have offices in Canada, the UK, Brazil, Korea, China, Sydney, and across Western Europe, and operate primarily as a for-profit, but we have created a nonprofit foundation that operates in India and Thailand to bring some of the learnings of our for-profit business to communities and emerging economies where they normally would not be accessible. And so Terracycle as a company, we have all really been fascinated by the concept of waste. And so if we take a step back, because right now the circular economy and circular solutions is a very hot topic, but the reality is that the circular economy is literally as old as the natural world. There is no waste in nature. Waste is a relatively recent invention. And so when we look at that, and I'm going to move relatively quickly just in the interest of brevity, but if you have any questions, please save them for later on. But an interesting thing happened in the middle of the 20th century, which is that we created the ability to create really complex materials. And that combined with the advent of the consumer economy and the post-war boom resulted in the proliferation of lots of disposable products. And it's easy to think about that as a terrible thing now, in part because of the devastating environmental implications. But what you're looking at are actual advertisements focused on the benefits of disposability. And there are real benefits there. There's a convenience factor. There is a sanitation and sterilization factor. And so there are some virtues within disposability that really are important to keep in mind as we think about reverse engineering our way from out of the current waste crisis and into a more circular model. But the reality is that the proliferation of disposable products and packaging and complex products and packaging has evolved much faster than the natural world has been able to cope with. And it's interesting because we talk about the waste crisis, and it is a waste crisis, and we think about the impact on the natural world, but the reality is that nature will evolve eventually. There is bacteria that has been found, or fungus that have been found that will eat plastic. Eventually, the world will evolve to accommodate and incorporate the waste that we've created. The only question is whether humanity will be around to see it or not, right? And whether we're going to be able to create solutions to bring to bear sooner. So we are right now living very much in a linear economy. People call it the take and make and waste economy, where we extract raw materials, create products and packaging, and the inevitable result for the vast majority of those products are that they end up going to landfill or incineration. And there's lots of reasons that go into that. There's lots of factors affecting it, but the single most important factor in looking at why things are waste or why things would get recycled is economics. There is a really simple equation impacting all of recycling, and it is simply the cost of collecting, or the logistics of collecting a waste stream, the cost of processing that waste stream, and then balancing those against the recovered material value. And anytime the recovered material value is high enough to cover the cost of collecting and processing it and provide some profit to the entity doing the processing, you're going to have a recycled material because there's a business model there. And so that's the case for some limited materials. I like to think about things and take them to the logical conclusion or to an absurd extreme. And so I like to think about gold and the fact that there is no gold waste in the world, simply because the material value is so high that when you have a piece of gold jewelry and it breaks, you don't throw it away. It's always worth repairing. And the challenge is that that is the case for only a very few waste streams: aluminum and glass and HDPE, paper, which are the waste streams that are generally recycled globally in both emerging and developed economies. But the vast majority of products are more complex or too small or the wrong color, and so they end up not getting recycled. There's been some great journalism on this just over the last year. PBS did a series called Plastic Wars, digging into the world of recycling and the claims of recycling and the investment that's gone into recycling from oil companies and material producers. That is really worth a watch. But that is the short history of recycling in a nutshell. We're also in an interesting phase right now because COVID-19 is having very serious impacts on recyclability. One of the things we're seeing is that as we talked about recycling being driven by economics, that almost always comes back to the cost of a barrel of oil. Because when it is cheaper to produce virgin plastic and make virgin plastic products and packaging than it is to recover plastic, that's going to be where businesses source product from. And so what you're looking at is the cost of oil over the last 10 years in orange, which averaged around $115, and then around 2014 or 15 dropped down to around $50. And earlier this year actually went negative. So you had to pay to get rid of a barrel of oil on the futures market, but is going to average out around $25. Now, the green line is the cost of recycling a ton of recyclable materials, not municipal solid waste, but recyclable materials from the city of Philadelphia, which averaged 2010 to 15, with them getting paid around $30 per ton. And then that dropped to where they were paying $20 a ton. And now the city of Philadelphia is paying $105 a ton to get rid of recyclable materials. And so that's driven in part by the lower price of oil, making recycled materials less desirable. It's also being impacted by the fact that a significant percentage of the end markets that previously accepted recycled materials, namely China and other Southeast Asian nations, have stopped accepting that material, which shut off one of the major end markets for those materials. But it also reflects the fact that the quality of packaging from a recyclability standpoint is going down, in that packaging is becoming more complex. You're seeing this now with the proliferation of pouches instead of glass or rigid plastic bottles. And those materials are lighter, and so you have to collect more of them to be able to process them. And they're also more complex, so it costs more to process them. And so really right now we're seeing a lot of headwinds against the recycling industry globally. And that is made more acute by some of the impacts of COVID. And so that's kind of the bad news. We're seeing additionally COVID having a significant impact on reuse, in that the use of single-use products and packaging is up significantly from a sanitization standpoint and a safety standpoint. Many reusable platforms have been paused, right? So think if you used to go get a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you would bring your mug and refill it, and now that is no longer allowed. Though we are seeing an increase in reuse platforms that are managed by somebody else, that allows for latency, so a pause between the reuse, so it's not being reused immediately in a coffee house, but is a product that gets sent somewhere and sanitized and sterilized and is again safe, and then going back out into the market. There is continued interest in that, right? And so those are kind of two of the challenging trends we're seeing from COVID. But then some of the interesting things is that we're seeing really positive impact overall in terms of concern and focus from people on the environment, right? And objectively, the planet is rejoicing in some ways, in that 2020 is on track to be the first year that there is a net reduction in humanity's impact on the planet from an environmental perspective, right? Greenhouse gas emissions are going down. Companies and countries are on track to hit greenhouse gas reduction standards that they were never going to hit pre-COVID. We're seeing a reduction in air pollution, and you've seen all these stories pop up in the news, right? Animals getting reintroduced to areas that have been overrun by people, and there is really an emotional component to that, that people are noticing, right? And we think that is going to continue long past when the pandemic is brought under control. And so we see that consumers are seeing have a clear focus on the environment and are looking for ways to plug in and feel purposeful. And we're seeing this in Terracycle's own recycling programs, in that we expected participation to plummet and stay very low throughout the pandemic, but we're actually seeing consumers seeking out ways to recycle both the waste that they had before, but also the new waste streams, glasses and masks and other PPE that they know are bad for the environment but aren't sure how to recycle, right? And so if we look at that linear economy, I'm going to move now into an overview of Terracycle's business. The first part of our business is to make that process a little more circular by offering recycling for things that aren't traditionally recyclable. And so we create customized recycling systems for everything from cigarette butts, which are collected in cities and casinos and on cruise ships, back when cruise ships were a thing, but also recycling programs for blades and razors and dirty diapers and contact lens blister packs, and all of the products that you normally aren't able, to put into your blue bin. We partner with the manufacturers of those products to create a recycling platform. And we also offer a zero waste box platform where you are able to purchase a recycling solution for absolutely anything at your house or your business. So we provide customized collection platforms, and then have an in-house materials science and R&D team that develops innovative solutions to processing complex materials like multi-layer laminate with aluminized mylar or aluminized polypropylene, and cigarette butts and coffee capsules, and allows us to turn them into things that can be used again, like recycled gins or gardens, or in a partnership with P&G and Aeon, which is one of the largest retailers in Japan. We actually are using Terracycle's recycled plastic to create the Olympic podiums at the Olympics next summer, right? So our goal is first to provide a recycling solution for everything. And then the next part of our business is to work with manufacturers to make more products out of waste. And a great example of that is the beach plastic platform that we built, which takes plastic recovered from beaches and oceans and waterways and integrates it into the first Head & Shoulders shampoo bottle. And now that has expanded to more than a dozen products. And so we work very closely with the Head & Shoulders and P&G packaging and product development teams to be able to take a very low grade, challenging to work with material and source it from our hundreds of thousands of collection locations globally, and turn it into the kind of high quality material that is required for the production standards for Head & Shoulders. One other interesting thing, if you are familiar with Head & Shoulders at all, you'll know that the bottle has always been white. Head & Shoulders shampoo bottles are always white. The challenge is that when we're collecting plastic from beaches and oceans and other areas where it's been degraded by the sun and sand, it's impossible to make that recovered plastic white again. And so as we were working through a solution for that with Head & Shoulders, they elected to lean into it and embrace the fact that the bottle's a different color because it's using plastic that was never used before, right? And so in that way, it was able to take what seemed to be a design limitation and turn it into an asset. So then and there's much more there, but I'm moving relatively quickly. But the third part of our business is to make things reusable. And so a couple of years ago, we launched a platform called Loop at the World Economic Forum. Loop is a platform that allows major consumer packaged goods companies to transition from using single-use disposable packaging and instead use durable, reusable packaging, and thus design our way out of the waste crisis, right? because the only thing better than being able to recycle everything is not needing to recycle anything, because it is all reusable. And so we based Loop on a really old concept. We talk about it as the milkman concept, but the reality is that this was prevalent across all industries. We used to cobble our shoes. We used to mend clothes. Things used to be designed to be reused. And from an economics perspective, if you think about it, when you retain ownership of something, it is an asset. So when a company owns the packaging, it is an asset, and you want that asset to be invested into. You want it to be as high quality and reusable as possible, because the cost of the asset from a financial perspective gets amortized over the life of the use. So if you can use something 100 times, then you're taking that one cost and dividing it over the 100 uses, which is different than the disposable mentality, where the cost of the packaging or the materials for the product is realized each time the product is sold, a one-time use model. So it's a cost. It's a very fundamental shift in the economics, but allows us to unlock some really interesting design. And so as we were developing Loop, we really looked at how do we solve for the challenges created by disposability, but maintain some of those virtues that I was talking about at the beginning, because that is key in that in order to move consumers reliably over to a reusable platform, it's important to keep in mind that many of those virtues, like convenience, are really important to consumers. And so instead of trying to push against them, we've tried to embrace them and create a platform that allows consumers to use products in the similar fashion to the way that they're using them now. Now, one of the interesting things, and I showed you this chart earlier, is that as packaging has evolved, and what you're looking at is the evolution of beverage packaging from glass, which was the predominant packaging format up until about 30 years ago, to aluminum cans, to PET bottles, to cartons, to pouches. And each step of that journey reduces the weight of the package, which reduces the carbon footprint in shipping the product. But the challenge is that each time you go across this, you're looking at a drop in the recycling rate. And so you're looking, this line is the recycling rate of each of these packaging formats today, with pouches being virtually non-recycled at any meaningful scale. And that is largely because of the complexity of the packaging and the fact that you have to create or collect 1 million pouches to get to the same processing level that you would get to with a much lower amount of glass, right? And so from a recycling perspective or a processing perspective, it's much more challenging. But here's the other thing. Think about this not with a sustainability hat on, or not from a professional perspective, but just as a person, as a consumer, when you're wanting to enjoy your favorite beverage, whatever it is, which of these formats would you most like to drink it out of? Almost everybody wants to drink out of a glass bottle, right? It's also the most recyclable, reusable format of all of these formats. But the economics moved us away from it, right? And so the question is, how do we get back to that? Because not only is it better from an environmental perspective, it's also better from a consumer perspective. There's a consumer delight factor that we lose as we go into other packaging formats. And so just to go one step down to show you how this works from a financial perspective, what we found is that, and these numbers are fake, but the scale of them is accurate, in that if we look at deodorant packaging, for instance, right now, manufacturing that package costs, let's say, 10 cents. And that means that when the product's sold, that 10 cents is accounted for as the cost. Now, creating a reusable deodorant package costs exponentially more, $3. But if we can use it 100 times, the cost of the packaging actually goes down and becomes cheaper on a per-use basis than disposable packaging, and reduces waste almost entirely. Now, the other interesting thing is that moving to a durable platform actually unlocks lots of interesting design opportunities, because instead of creating the cheapest possible package, we can create the best possible package or product. And so here's an example of that. Haagen-Dazs, in moving to the Loop platform, their packaging development team was able to create a package that solves almost all of the major challenges with ice cream packaging. And if you're thinking, what challenges are there with ice cream package? Just think about the fact that when you buy ice cream at the store in a paperboard container and put it in the grocery sack and it's hot outside and you put it in with all your other groceries, by the time you get home, the ice cream's soft or maybe is melted and spilled out a little bit. And when you hold the pint of ice cream, which is actually the single most common use or serving size of 1 pint of ice cream is almost always 1 pint of ice cream. And most people don't eat it at the table, they eat it on the couch or in bed. And so as you're holding it, you're melting the ice cream from the side, and then you're trying to eat it from the top, which is still frozen, and then you end up with ice cream soup, right? And so now this is not optimized for anyone. The packaging that Haagen-Dazs designed keeps ice cream frozen solid for hours. When you open it up and hold it, your hand doesn't freeze. Your hand doesn't melt the ice cream. In fact, the ice cream starts melting from the top down, which is conveniently the way that you typically eat the ice cream. And so not only does this package get rid of the paperboard waste, but it actually improves your experience in eating the ice cream, right? And so we took that same concept to partners across the consumer packaged goods spectrum and have brought on many of the brand names you know and love, both the big ones and the small ones, to take that same concept and implement it into everything to like laundry capsules, which not only eliminates waste, but also keeps those pods dry. If you've ever used the dishwasher detergent pods or laundry capsule pods, you know that if they get a little bit wet, they start to stick together and then they disintegrate and it turns into a big mess. But by moving to a durable packaging type, we're able to keep them drier. So it actually improves your experience again, in addition to getting rid of the waste. Or biscuit packaging that prevents your biscuits or cookies from getting crumbling, right? There's thousands more examples, but in the interest of time, won't go into a lot more detail. One of the questions we get most often is, how do you participate? How do you get these products? And so we've launched Loop as an e-commerce platform. You can go to loopstore.com and buy these products. Each time you buy into the product, the first time you buy one, there is a deposit that is fully refundable. Then you pay for the packaging as a deposit and then for the product. And so then the next time you buy the product, your deposit transitions over and you are only then paying for the cost of the product. So you buy the products online, they get shipped to you in a reusable tote. You use and enjoy the products, and then when you're done, put them back into the tote and they go back to our facilities to be cleaned and sterilized and sent out again to be reused. And we are working with retailers across the world. In the US, our partners are Kroger and Walgreens, to launch Loop within their e-commerce platforms, but also within their stores. And so the goal is that you'll be able to buy products online or in the store and return the empty containers. You don't have to clean them. So it's similar to simply throwing something away, in that you just put them into a bag or a tote and you drop them off at the store or send them back. And we take care of the cleaning, the sterilization, and getting them back out into the system. And so the model becomes almost as easy for consumers as the current disposable system is, in that you're just buying products and using them and then sending essentially the old dirty product away while you get a new clean one. This is live right now across the US and in France. We just launched in the UK a couple of weeks ago and are seeing really fantastic engagement and interest from consumers. So that is everything Terracycle is doing in a very quick nutshell, and that's what we're doing to eliminate the idea of waste. I wanted to leave enough time so that we could have some good dialogue and discussion and questions, and so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up the floor. So please feel free to either chat some questions in or just jump in if there's anything you'd like to dig into.
I have a question in the chat from Paul. Are you making a profit with Loop in those markets?
Oh yeah, it's a great question. Loop is not yet profitable in that we're investing into it like a new venture, but it will, as it scales, the forecast and economics are for it to be profitable. Possible to get a copy? Sure, I can share a copy of the presentation. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing a couple of questions in there. One is there a site to review the full range of recycled products? Yes, so there's lots of examples on the Terracycle site. The way our platform works is that our expertise is in collecting non-recyclable materials and turning them into something that can be recycled. And so most of our products don't go into really visible solutions. The ones I showed you, like the gardens and the playgrounds, we typically develop to support the brand partners who are funding the platform. So they'll donate a playground or a garden to an at-need community as part of the program with Terracycle. But most of our products go into a broad range of recycled products, everything from outdoor furniture to lumber to many other applications.
Matt, so I think that the systems approach to this is amazing, and some of the kind of work that you're doing across industries and categories are really great. My question is about sort of another piece, which is the way in which brands either are engaging with you in a kind of serious way to address these issues, and the ways in which it might just be a way for them to avoid it. And so here I'll give you a quick question, quick story. So let's say I go to my grocery store and I buy late July chips, several bags of these things, and
Sure.
I'm an environmental consumer, and I buy it. It's got the Terracycle logo on it. Mm-hmm. So it's like, great, I'm going to pick this brand. I'm going to buy it because I know that there's, they've made the extra effort. And, once I go home, I go to the Terracycle website that's on it to see how I can recycle my 5 empty packages. I'm committed enough that I'm going to go ahead and do that. And as the cost of recycling these bags, I'm going to give up this information. Then I get there and I find out that the Late July program has 7,359 locations. They are full. They are not accepting any more ways to drop it off. Tells consumers that, buy us because we're recyclable. And then it turns out that it's not possible. And that's not the only product where that's true, right? So is that an old part of your business model, or how does that work? Because it does look a lot like the company is sort of using you for greenwashing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that sounds like a really frustrating experience. Maybe one that you've had yourself, right?
Yeah, multiple times
totally.
Actually, because I keep coming back saying, no, it's going to be better this time. This is just, because I know that, your hearts are in the right place. And I know that you're doing all of this amazing other work. So I know it's not intended to be that way. But yeah. Can you kind of address it?
Sure. Well, look, first, I think the frustration you're expressing is, I think, less about Terracycle and more about a paradigm where we are living with products and packaging that were never intended to be recycled and really aren't being recycled. And even the things that are communicated as fully recyclable, that I imagine everybody on this call are diligently sorting out and cleaning and drying and separating and putting into your local blue bins, most of that is actually not getting recycled. Right. And so I think that there is a fundamental challenge to the system that goes far beyond Terracycle, right? And that,
right.
Anything other than clear plastic, PET, really isn't going to get recycled. I think the average over the last 15 years has been that less than 9% of all the plastic produced on an annual basis gets recycled, right? 91 or 92% is even the material that goes to recycling facilities ends up getting landfilled or incinerated. Right. So there you are right in that there is a fundamental challenge to the system. I think where I challenge the claim of greenwashing is an important one. And I think it's important for all of us to be good stewards of claims around environmental projects. The reality, though, is that we are offering a recycling platform for products that otherwise wouldn't get recycled. And we're doing that with finite resources and with an eye towards capturing and recycling as much of the material as possible. And the way we approach it is that if we're able to collect and divert waste and keep it out of landfill, then that's a net win. And we've done the LCAs to evaluate that and know that it is a net win from a carbon perspective to recycle waste that otherwise isn't getting recycled. Now, the fact that there is, you know, we're not able to, the programs aren't able to accommodate all of the recycling is an absolute limitation and something that everyone would want to change, but is also it's a limitation in the system overall, right?
So maybe that's a kind of a larger question of how do you, as people who are attempting to make system change, you know, kind of navigate this sense of having a lot of actors with mixed motives in terms of why they want to engage with you, and how do you think about advancing your agenda and, you know, trying to, you know, make sure that you're not being used.
It's interesting that you're focused so specifically on Terracycle when we're really the claim of greenwashing, the claim of recyclability is for any company to claim that something is recyclable is a stretch, right? And one of the things we're noticing is that anything that gets claimed as recyclable, we know that most of those products don't end up getting recycled, right? And so where is the culpability there? And I think that's where we can all acknowledge that the system as it is right now is not optimal and it's something we need to fix. From Terracycle's perspective, if we're able to capture and recycle at least a portion of that waste, then that is work worth doing. And we're constantly evaluating ways to expand the work that we're doing and to help our partners design for recyclability and for reusability. And so in that way, we're hoping to move the discussion forward on a larger scale. So I think there's limits to any system.
I think, like you said initially, Michael, the fact that we're only recycling 10% of our current waste provides a pretty low baseline to improve on. I get Greg's cynicism around greenwashing. I mean, the whole issue of the movie around Plastic Wars was really basically the petrochemicals industry's way of trying to present recycling as a way of consuming without guilt, and we know how that ended up. And so I'm interested to hear how I'm hearing the narrative shift from recycled to reusable, sort of back to the old milkman idea that, you know, these things are considered the whole sort of lifespan of the product. And is that part of your narrative to get away from the recycle and all the baggage that comes with that?
Yeah, well, and we don't really see it as baggage in that we know there is an important role to be recycling now, things that are often challenging to recycle. But the reality is that that is a short-term solution. And early on, 15 years ago, we would joke that if we could create a recycling program for absolutely every product, that would be a good day's work, right? Then we could put our feet up on the desk and consider that a success. But the reality is that we would then still be living in a world where products are made to be used only once. And so it's the equivalent of solving something at the symptom level and not at the source. And so that was the genesis for Loop, for moving to a paradigm shift and helping leverage the work that we've been doing and the relationships we've built within the consumer packaged goods industry to create a platform that would enable the shift to a more durable, reusable platform. And so we see it as kind of short and medium and long-term solutions, and that the goal where we want everyone to get to is to move to a durable circular model. And we're doing a lot of work to help our partners and others move that way. And there are lots of other great organizations. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation is doing fantastic work. There's many others. But the reality is that on a daily basis, there are billions of products being thrown away. And so it's also important to provide solutions now to help recycle those things.
Michael, great presentation. While you were speaking, I was realizing that I'm holding in my hand a pencil that I have been buying by the dozens for decades, and I throw them away. And then I looked over at this container of my implements, and all except for a couple of wooden pencils and a metal scissors are all single-use items. And I remember when I was in grade school, I had a mechanical pencil and I put leads in them. And it really takes me back to start rethinking the daily purchases that I've made over the time and really start thinking about how that, how I'm contributing to this as a wasteful product. So thank you.
Well, look, we are all voting with our dollars every time we buy a product. And so I think it's important for us to remember. And you're right. So many of us have internalized disposability. And one of the fascinating ways to think about this is think about, there's plastic bag bans in some of the states where you live, there's probably plastic bag bans in place. New Jersey's been working on it. And that feels like a victory, right? To get rid of those single-use bags. But think about all of the single-use packaging in the grocery store.
Yeah.
The cookie packaging, the chip bags, the spaghetti, like all of that is the exact same issue, but we're focused on this disposable shopping bag as the challenge, right?
Or the drinking straw was another one, right?
The straw, yeah, exactly, right? And that we all felt good about passing the straw bans because now the turtle won't have the straw in its nose. But that is really, that's not moving the needle forward in a fundamentally powerful way that's going to change things. Though I will say, I think that speaks to the plastic bag ban specifically, speaks to the power of an image to mobilize consumers, right? And this is one of the biggest challenges with the climate crisis and getting people engaged with the climate crisis is that it's hard to find the compelling imagery that it makes it personal for people. But that picture of a turtle with a straw in its nose sure did it, right? And so I think it's important to keep in mind. Do we have some more questions?
Yeah, we have more questions in the chat. One is, what are the hidden challenges that you've uncovered as you set up Loop, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, lots of challenges. And I think the first was convincing partners to take the jump, right? To get companies to shift, because anytime you're looking at working with brands at the scale that we were able to get to Loop, production runs are in the tens of millions for a small product, right? And so as we're incubating a tiny platform, how do we get these companies to work on a smaller scale? But then also just working through the logistics and costs and finding ways to set the system up so that it isn't prohibitively expensive. And that the goal of the platform is that you'll be able to buy the products that you typically buy at the store for the same or comparable price as you would pay at the store. But to do that in a way that gets rid of the single-use packaging. And so working through the mechanics and logistics of that was challenging. And I will say I'm not as close to the Loop part of the business, but it took a couple of years of really intense work.
Another question from Chris: how do you address the proliferation of plastics from the production side? It seems impossible to keep up with more complex types. Are you lobbying for more limitations on types of packaging created?
Yeah, well, look, I think it's helpful to think about the genesis, like what are the levers driving the proliferation of complex packaging. And I think from Terracycle's perspective, we don't lobby. We're not really involved at a governmental level. We focus really on providing the solutions in the market. But one of the great ironies of the last 25 years is that much of the development of that complex packaging came out of a desire to reduce carbon footprint, right? Brands who are looking to transport products and make them lighter so that they would use less gasoline to deliver them or to produce them, excuse me, moved to more complex packaging, because if you take a glass bottle and you need to get the same oxygen impermeability, or for a dark package, that light or UV impermeability out of a smaller flexible package, it requires more complexity, right? And so the genesis of much of the challenge was originally intended to be a good thing, right? It's just, there is no easy solution. There's no silver bullet, because there are always unintended consequences and externalities that you're not aware of. And so that's why we think it's important to think at a systems level, because, you know, otherwise it becomes a game of whack-a-mole, right? We reduce the carbon footprint. Well, now we're creating a recyclability issue, right? We solve the recyclability issue and then something else pops up. So it's really important to think about things holistically. And that's where the shift to a circular mentality is really fundamentally powerful. And I think will prove to be one of the defining shifts for capitalism in the 21st century.
And Chris is also asking, are you pushing consumer education on limiting plastics?
Oh yeah, I mean, from Terracycle's perspective and from an environmental perspective, the single best thing we could all do is to stop buying stuff, right? That's it. If we if we reduce our consumption, our impact on the planet goes down dramatically and immediately, right? So yes, we encourage you know, people to reuse what they have and to buy used when you have to buy something, and if you have to buy something new, to buy durable, right? There's, you know, a series of steps we can all take that are going to help reduce our net impact on the planet. I'm just seeing a variety of things. I'm seeing somebody mention that Montana doesn't recycle glass. You'd be really surprised how many different municipalities don't recycle things, and that number is sadly only going to increase as, you know, recycling is becoming a more challenging business proposition.
The other thing I'd just like to call out is I really enjoyed the data that you presented on the cost of plastics as it declines and the break points. And as we know, the petrochemical industry is gearing up for, you know, huge production increases in plastics. So they're obviously seeing a different side of this proposition to what you're presenting today, and that's surely one of your biggest challenges. Like with electric cars, I mean, people that drive electric cars around at the moment are basically driving coal-fired cars. So it's a question of like how we shift the burden or the around the different consumer products. I mean, what's your take on that?
Oh man, it really goes back to what we were just talking about, which is that there are always unintended consequences, right? As you move the parameters of the definition out, then there are always more implications, right? We think electric cars are fantastic. Well, you know, then where's the electricity coming from? In the US, most of it's coal fired. But then also, what happens when that car gets to the end of life? You know what I mean? What do you do with those batteries? What do you do with the precious metals? What is the environmental impact of mining the precious metals required to produce those batteries at scale? You know, if we shift to 10% electric cars on the road, the calculations around the impact in terms of mining and resource extraction are terrifying, right? And so there is no easy answer here. It's important for us all to think about things holistically. And in whatever capacity we're working, either in a production capacity or as a consumer, to be mindful of the ways in which we're, you know, pulling resources out and the impact we're having.
As far as like electric cars go and that not being like a great solution, it's kind of like what you're saying, like, you know, stop buying products. Well, then we need to stop using our cars more. Stop using cars as much as we do. And, you know, I think we've seen, you know, at least through COVID, not driving around as much and not having to go into work, that it's really the most impactful solution.
Right. It's really just to reduce.
Yeah. Stop driving cars so much, and then you know, then you don't actually need to own your own car. You could share it with a group or do a zip car thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Anything like that, and then you're not using it as much. And then so like I have a plug-in hybrid, so it gets 60 miles on the electric before it switches over to gas, which gets me like pretty much everywhere I need to get to, except for a long trip. And so while I'm up here in Maine, what I do absolutely deliberately do, because there's 3 big windmills on the island. So when it's really windy and windy days, we're exporting electricity to the mainland, and on days when there's not much wind, then we're not, So what I do is I wait. So when the car's battery is down a little bit or down, most of the way, I wait for a windy day and then I plug the car in. And I don't plug it in on a calm day with hardly any wind, because then I'd be sucking power from the mainland to charge the car, which would be silly. So just, but it's like being mindful of all that and playing the game and trying to figure out how to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Gavin, I thought on a windy day you'd get on your sailboat.
Yeah, that too, but yeah. Plug the car in, then get on the sailboat.
Well, listen, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I've really enjoyed, Michael, your presentation. That the two-sided marketplace is fascinating, particularly in this country that is so driven by the plethora of choices and the consumer culture and the whole marketing sort of drive behind all of these consumer products. So I'm really excited about what you're doing and the courage that you have to take on this big beast. It's quite a it's a huge,
amazing presentation. Thank you so much for all of the good work you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for listening to me rattle on for an hour. I really enjoyed the conversation. Look forward to reaching out. So, check out terracycle.com if you have any questions, or shoot me an email. My email is Michael Waas, 2 A's and an S in the last name, at terracycle.com. And
top of the hour. I think we should leave it there. It's been a very engaging session, Michael. There's so much more to talk about, but perhaps we'll have you back in the near future.
yeah,
Take care.
thank you all.
Bye, everybody.